Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Since we have everyone here today, thank you for joining us today to talk about the For the People Act and the importance of its passage. As you know, the For the People Act is federal legislation that recently passed the House of Representatives and is awaiting action in the Senate. It is the rare bill that is properly named, as it would strengthen the fundamentals of our democracy and ensure all of us would have a greater voice in our elections and our government. Right now in West Virginia, as in other states, there is an aggressive new push to make voting and participating in our democracy more difficult. Senate Bill 565 is being considered right now by the House of Delegates, and it would end the most popular early voting days that voters in our state have relied on for the past 2 decades. Other states are going even further with their voter suppression bills, like in Georgia, where it is illegal to give food and water to voters waiting in a long line to vote. The crisis that's facing our democracy right now couldn't be more real, and addressing it could not be more important. Joining us right now to talk about what's happening here in the Mountain State and why passage of For the People Act is so important is West Virginia's former Secretary of State, Natalie Tennant. Thanks for joining us, Natalie. You want to go ahead?
Sure, Lynette. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and for everyone else who's on the line and watching too. I really appreciate it. It's good to be with you all today as we discuss the future of our elections in the state and the country. It is more evident than ever with the attack on our U.S. Capitol and the chipping away of voting rights in the states. The For the People Act is the strength and stability we need to ensure we have fair representation. The For the People Act protects our freedom to vote by making sure voting options are equally accessible across the country. And West Virginians want it. Not only are there polls that show Americans and West Virginians overwhelmingly support For the People Act, take a look at what happened on Monday at the state legislature. West Virginians showed up to voice their concerns about how the legislature is poised to restrict our voting rights. Those that support the legislation were mainly out-of-state folks or elected officials. West Virginians want to be able to cast our ballots freely, safely, and equally. And if state lawmakers, county clerks, and the Secretary of State restrict our rights and our voting rights, West Virginians can turn to the For the People Act. Now, bold federal election advancements like this are what have broken down unfair barriers and helped to make the promise of democracy real for all of us. I'll give you some history. The Help America Vote Act of 2002 offered guidelines for election administration. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 opened up and enabled Americans to register at the DMV and other state agencies through the federal motor voter law. And the Voting Rights Act of 1995 was part of the civil rights movement of our lifetime. These federal landmark legislations did not take away the ability of states to control and run their own elections. Quite the opposite. As a matter of fact, it empowered the states and the voters and gave more power to local and state election officials. The work in this bill is possible to accomplish. It is feasible and able to be implemented. And let's not let the naysayers sell our ability and our desires short. As a former 2-term Secretary of State, I know that we can do this. Many states have already had some of these measures in place that this bill is requesting. Just take a look at Michigan, for example, where the voters by referendum demanded election reforms. The Secretary of State there implemented automatic voter registration, same-day registration, no excuse absentee voting, a citizen redistricting commission, among other reforms in a matter of months. It is proof that these measures can be implemented. This bill provides the funding and a fair timeline. The voters have led us forward on movements like this. They have embraced the strengthening of democracy by overwhelming using no excuse voting and turning out in record numbers in this past election. We ask our representatives to listen to the voters and not the scare tactics. Senator Manchin, and rightly so, is evaluating this legislation, and we've heard his concerns. He wants at least 15 days of early voting. It's in the bill. He wants bipartisan work. It's in the bill because this benefits Americans no matter their party affiliation. He wants common sense election security reforms. It's in the bill. He wants a more transparent campaign finance system. It's in the bill. He co-sponsored this legislation in 2019, and we asked Senator Manchin and Senator Capito to come together in support of For the People Act and show the bipartisan effort to get this bill passed. It's what the voters have asked for and what they've demonstrated that they would use.
Great, thanks so much, Natalie. I'm gonna hand it over now to Pastor David Freisen. Dr. Freisen is the former senior advisor to WVU's president for diversity and community outreach. Dr. Freisen?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this Zoom call. I think it is so very important that all of our voices have an opportunity to be heard in terms of this sacrosanct opportunity to vote. I think it is very important for us to consider the fact that in West Virginia, this legislation will empower not just Black and brown people, but it will empower virtually everyone. It is very important that we take the idea of the voting privilege out of the hands of the corporations and the well-heeled and return it back to the people. I think it really is important that when you look at the provisions of the bill, I do not understand how any patriot could be against any of these provisions. So the online voter registration, the automatic voter registration, the same day registration, while it will empower Black and brown people, most importantly for West Virginia, it will empower all people. And so I think that to be against this bill is to be against our federalism, is to be against the sacrosanct ability of the people to decide the direction of the country. You know, at one point we used to talk a lot about patriotism, and patriotism means a lot of things to a lot of people. But the bottom line of our patriotism should be the fact of what our Constitution says about us being a democracy, a Republican form of government where the people have an opportunity to vote for their leaders. So I would like to suggest to you that it is very important for us to understand that this bill is not just to empower people of color, not just to empower the poor, but it is to empower our democracy moving forward. And I would suggest to you that over the past few years with the bill, with the Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United and other things, we have seen the pulling away of the ability of people to be able to have their voices heard. And so I think this is aptly named For the People Act, and I heartily endorse it. And I'm hoping that our congressional leaders will understand for West Virginia, we need to be for the People Act.
Thank you so much. I'm going to throw everybody off just a little bit and go out of order, because with Dr. Freisen talking about Citizens United, I want to bring in now Julie Archer, who is with West Virginia Citizens for Clean Elections. And she's going to talk about dark money in politics and how that is silencing our voices. Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Lynette. As Lynette said, I'm Julie Archer. I'm a project manager with West Virginia Citizen Action Group, and I also serve as coordinator of West Virginia Citizens for Clean Elections, a coalition of organizations working to increase transparency and accountability in elections, advance reforms that strengthen our democracy, and ensure fairness and impartiality in our courts. And it's really an honor to be here today with Secretary Tennant, Dr. Freisen, and other community leaders to stand in support of the For the People Act. With legislatures in 43 states, including West Virginia, trying to make it harder to vote, it's critical that the Senate pass the For the People Act to thwart these attacks and protect every American's right and freedom to vote. But these attacks on voting rights aren't the only threat to our democracy. Our coalition actually formed because we recognized the negative impact that money on politics was having on all of our issues and our ability to address problems and challenges facing the state. And over the years, we have made some progress at both the state and the federal levels towards strengthening our disclosure laws and countering the influence of special interests. But since then, as Dr. Freisen pointed out, we've had the Citizens United decision, and that really has undermined much of that progress. And now the circumstances are much more dire, and our democracy is in desperate need of repair. This decision, it hindered the government's ability to regulate political expenditures. It tossed out restrictions on corporate spending and enabled third-party organizations to spend unlimited amounts on political campaigns. And so the result has been less disclosure, more secret, more dark money in our elections, making it harder than ever and sometimes impossible to know who's really paying for political ads, leaving us uninformed about who's trying to influence our votes and the votes of our elected officials. And so fortunately, the For the People Act, it's a path forward that can help reduce the influence of big money in politics, empower average citizens, and make our democracy healthy again by shining a light on dark money, making voting simpler, safer, and fairer, and holding public officials accountable. The For the People Act will help us fight back against moneyed interests, remove barriers so that regular people won't be shut out of the political process, and move us towards a government that's more representative, accountable, and responsive to the needs of all of us. This is a real opportunity not only to transform our democracy, but also to help us start making making progress on other pressing issues facing West Virginia and the nation. And in his recent statement on the For the People Act, Senator Manchin reaffirmed his support for ensuring safe and fair elections and requiring secret special interest donors to reveal their identities. We commend Senator Manchin for his commitment to strengthening our democracy, and we hope that he and Senator Capito will work together to expand and protect voting rights and help us create a democracy that's representative of all Americans' voices and values by supporting the For the People Act. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. We're going to move now to Sam Hickman. He is with the National Association of Social Workers, West Virginia. Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Lynette. I'm pleased to be here. Again, my name is Samuel Hickman. I'm the Executive Director of the West Virginia chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. West Virginians voted in record numbers in the midst of a global pandemic, and still we rank about 47th in voter turnout in the country. The results of our election certainly do not point to any fraud or abuse having taken place. Unfortunately, not every state is acting openly and honestly. The Supreme Court has effectively eliminated the Voting Rights Act, and states have wasted no time in protecting their own interests and the interests of the most powerful people. West Virginia's experience and striving to do better could have been a beacon to the rest of the country, but our legislature is now also doing its best to restrict voter access in the name of preventing fraud and abuse and easing the burden on our county clerks rather than making it easier for voters. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, is designed to prevent states from infringing on the rights of voters. Its provisions range from regulating money in politics to restoring the voting rights of formerly incarcerated individuals. There is a renewed voter suppression movement in America. It essentially argues that some voters are more equal than others. This is un-American. It is unacceptable. States are enacting or attempting to enact unnecessary voter ID requirements and curtail early voting. Nearly half of the hundreds of the restrictive bills that have been introduced around the country this year limit mail-in voting. The social work profession is dedicated to helping society's most vulnerable citizens regain self-sufficiency, to become contributing members of society, and to have the opportunity to live out the American dream. They can't do this if the deck is stacked against them. I'll end with a statement by Mel Wilson, who leads our organization's national work with coalitions on the For the People Act. Mel says, "It would be a critical error should the social work community fail to recognize that the surge of voting suppression legislation in many states is not part of an unbroken pattern dating back to 1870 of preventing Black and brown people unfettered access to the ballot. We must continue to join with others, especially at the state and local levels, to protect this basic civil right. I urge Senator Manchin and Senator Capito to work for and vote for the For the People Act." Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sam. We're going to move now to Takaya Smith. Takaya. Are you with us? Ryan, I don't know if we have lost her or not. Oh, she's, we're going to let her back in. She dropped out. Give her just a moment. Takaya, are you with us? Looks like she's having some problems connecting. So while we're waiting for her, we're going to move on to talk to Ryan Frankenberry. He's the executive director of West Virginia's Working Families Party. Ryan.
Thanks, Lynette. And thanks for everyone that's joining us today, both here in the Zoom with our friends from the media and our friends from folks that care about democracy, and also everyone that's watching us on Facebook and might watch us on YouTube or other social media platforms. My name is Ryan Frankenberry. I am the state director of the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party is building a multiracial party of working people to transform our country. State by state and community by community, WFP is building a political home for all of us who see bigotry, bailouts, and business as usual in our political system and ask, is this the best that we can do? Well, it's not. During this legislative session here in West Virginia, we've seen a Republican supermajority that has tried to take away our voting rights, that is cutting our budget by almost half, or attempting to. Meanwhile, saying that they're going to bring 400,000 people to West Virginia. Those people that are going to come to West Virginia want to come to a state that is welcoming and inclusive. They don't want to come to a state that is disenfranchising people and making it harder to participate in their government. We've got to look to the highest performing states and see what they do. And we know what they do. They allow same-day registration. They allow automatic registration. They make sure that there are plenty of polling places, plenty of ballot drop-offs. Voting is as accessible as, getting a library book or checking your mail. We need that here in West Virginia. We don't need to be going backwards. We did have a successful election in the 2020 pandemic, but we can do better. And we should take from the lessons that we learned from that to make absentee, no excuse voting a guarantee for everyone. We need to make sure that our redistricting process is clean and fair. Right now, we are facing a tremendous redistricting effort in West Virginia as we go from a House of Delegates of 67 members, or 67 districts, I'm sorry, with 100 members representing several multi-member districts down to 100 single-member districts. That process could be fraught with corruption. And we need to make sure that that all of our voices are heard and that we have clean and fair redistricting. As we face losing a congressional seat, we go from 3 congressional members down to 2. We need to make sure that our redistricting of our congressional seats are fair. Gerrymandering has been notorious in West Virginia. It's been done by both parties. We need to make sure that we have processes that give everyone a fair and equal shot. With that, I'm not going to take much time, but I do want to thank everyone that is helping us amplify this message. The Working Families Party is calling on Senator Manchin and Senator Capito to join on to the For the People Act and make sure that West Virginians are getting a fair chance to participate in their government. Thank you, Lynette.
Thanks, Ryan. Do we have Takaya? Are you with us? No, I think I saw.
Yes.
Yay, thanks so much for being here. We can't hear you.
Okay, should be able to hear you now. Great, thank you. Happy to be here today. My name is Takaya Smith, and I'm a youth and racial justice organizer for the Young West Virginia Power Building Movement. Last year, I had the privilege of mobilizing students across the state through the Young WV Voters Project. Students who come from generationally historical disenfranchisement in our electoral process. We're taking the lead on getting young people of all backgrounds registered to vote and engaged in our process regardless of their backgrounds or political party. We encountered an unprecedented amount of energy from these young people. But of course, with that said, we also encountered, it didn't take long for us to encounter the barriers these young people were facing when trying to participate in our democracy. Students, a population that is inherently transient, found the process complex and inaccessible consistently. College students who had registered previously at their high schools had their registration purged without notice. Students could no longer update their voter information due to arbitrary deadlines and relied on early voting dates because of their hectic schedules. The For the People Act would support young people's right to participate in our democracy. The 2016 showed young people ages 18 to 29 at a turnout in West Virginia at around 33%. It's among the lowest in the country, but in the 2020 election, we saw those numbers grow. We need to keep heading in the right direction. So we encourage Senator Manchin and Senator Capito to do the right thing by supporting the For the People Act and supporting young people's right to participate in an election without unnecessary barriers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And while we see a ton of support here in West Virginia and across the country, DC politicians being led by Senator Mitch McConnell are threatening to abuse the Senate filibuster to prevent any bill protecting voting rights from getting an up or down vote. And this is absolutely wrong. And that's why right now we're joined by Ellie Zupnick with Fix Our Senate. Ellie.
Thank you, Annette. I'm Ellie Zupnick. As Lynette mentioned, I'm here with Fix Our Senate, a national coalition making the Senate work for workers and families. I was invited here today as someone who worked in the Senate for 10 years, had an up close and personal view of how broken it is. And I'm now working with groups and people across the country on doing whatever we can do to fix it. The other speakers today laid out why the For the People Act is so critical for West Virginians, people across the country, and the health of our democracy. I'm here to say that unless the Senate is fixed and the filibuster is eliminated as a tool for McConnell and a minority of senators to block the will of the majority, the For the People Act is simply not going to get done. This isn't about partisanship or politics. It's just the reality of today's broken Senate. Senator Manchin is working every single day to reach across the aisle and deliver results, but the Senate rules, and especially the outdated and abused filibuster, allow the minority to play political games at the expense of the American people and people in West Virginia. The filibuster used to be a tool that was used primarily to block civil and voting rights bills, but is now being abused to block anything and everything, even bipartisan bills. The filibuster used to involve senators actually holding the Senate floor and talking. Now a single senator can email Senate leadership that he wants to filibuster a bill, doesn't even have to show up to the Senate floor, and the legislation is stopped cold unless it can get a supermajority. The filibuster used to be used by individual members who felt strongly about legislation and worked to impact the outcome. Now it's used by political parties and leadership to wage partisan attacks on the other side. This is why even those who supported the filibuster in the past as a tool promoting bipartisanship and compromise now understand that it's become the exact opposite, a partisan tool used to create gridlock and obstruction. So I join the other speakers today in thanking Senator Manchin for his work delivering results so far, especially for his 50th vote, pulling the overwhelmingly popular American Rescue Plan over the finish line in the face of partisan obstruction. And I'm hopeful that he will continue listening to his constituents, like those on his call and many, many others, and put democracy and the For the People Act ahead of the Jim Crow filibuster. Thank you.
Great. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today, all of our speakers and the media that's on the line. And we're going to now open it up to the press and see if there are any questions. Do you guys have any questions for us? I don't see anyone with any questions. So I just, again, want to thank everyone for being on today and participating in this very important outreach to Senator Manchin and Senator Capito about the For the People Act. And I look forward to speaking with all of you again soon.
Thank you all. We're going to end the Facebook Live right now.
Great.